A king stands dead for a year while an army of invisible monsters builds his temple in fear. Before modern flight, Solomon used the wind as a chariot and commanded ancient lasers to cut stone. How did one man master technologies that defy the laws of physics? Today, we reveal the terrifying, high-tech secrets of Prophet Solomon, the master of the unseen world. Imagine a throne made of gold and rare jewels sitting in a palace thousands of miles away from the king. Prophet Solomon sat upon his ivory chair and asked his council who could bring this massive object before him today. A powerful Ifrit from among the jinn claimed he could deliver the throne before the king could stand from his seat. But another man, possessing a secret knowledge from the divine book, looked at the king with absolute and calm confidence. He whispered that he could bring the throne in the time it takes for a human eye to blink a single time. Before a single breath could be drawn, the laws of physics shattered and the air itself seemed to fold like thin paper. The golden throne of the queen materialized instantly in the center of the hall, shimmering under the desert sun. This was not a magic trick or a simple illusion meant to entertain a crowd of curious onlookers in the ancient world. It was the ultimate display of Ilm Ladunni, a divine technology that manipulates the very fabric of time and physical space. How could a human being move tons of solid metal across an entire continent without any visible machinery or effort today? We often think of ancient history as a primitive era of simple tools and basic wooden spears held by unwashed tribes. Yet, the kingdom of Solomon was a laboratory of the impossible where the seen and the unseen worlds worked as one. He did not rely on the slow caravans of the merchants or the tired horses of the royal messengers to expand his reach. He commanded forces that vibrate at frequencies beyond our modern comprehension and our most advanced scientific sensors. The teleportation of the throne remains the most documented and terrifying example of a power that we have long forgotten. It proves that the mind of a believer, connected to the source, can bypass the rigid barriers of the material universe. Modern science is only now beginning to explore the concept of quantum entanglement and the shifting of matter through space. But for the master of Ilm Ladunni, these complex cosmic laws were simple tools used to serve the mission of the Creator. The jinn watched in shock as a mortal human achieved a feat of speed that their plasma-based bodies could never replicate. This event serves as our gateway into the hidden world of Solomon, the king who controlled the elements and the spirits. Every pillar and every stone in his grand temple was placed by forces that ordinary men could not see today. Get ready to journey through a lost civilization where the wind was a chariot and copper flowed like water in the streets. We will uncover the secret biology of the jinn and the high-tech architecture they built under the command of the seal. This is the story of the one era in human history when the veil was lifted and the impossible became a daily reality. Join us as we explore the untold legacy of Prophet Solomon and the divine technologies that built his eternal kingdom. The mystery of the throne is only the beginning of a larger investigation into the secrets of the Master of the world. Prepare yourself for a deep dive into the most advanced kingdom to ever exist on the face of the earth. We must ask if we are truly alone on this planet or if the servants of Solomon are still among us in the shadows. Solomon was the son of the great prophet David, inheriting a lineage of divine guidance and noble leadership. From a young age, he displayed a depth of wisdom that left the most experienced judges in total awe of his mind. He possessed a unique quality known as hikmah, which allowed him to perceive the hidden truth behind every human conflict. Once, his father David listened as the young Solomon proposed a more perfect judgment in a complex case of property. But the true turning point of his life occurred when he made a sincere and monumental prayer to the great Creator. He asked for a kingdom so vast and so unique that no human being could ever possess its equal in the future. This was not a request born of greed or a desire for personal glory and the accumulation of heavy worldly riches. Solomon wanted to establish a civilization that would serve as a living proof of the absolute power of the divine on earth. Allah accepted his sincere plea and granted him a level of authority that completely transcended all known laws of nature. He became the first and only ruler to bridge the gap between the material world and the invisible spiritual realms. To Solomon, power was not a tool for oppression, but a heavy responsibility to be carried with constant and deep gratitude. He spent his days in the service of the poor and his nights in the humble worship of the one who gave him everything. His kingdom was an experimental ground where heaven and earth finally met in a state of perfect and beautiful harmony. Solomon understood that true sovereignty belongs only to God, and he was merely a temporary custodian of these secrets. This humility was the actual secret that allowed him to control the most rebellious forces in the entire universe today. Even as the jinn worked to build his grand monuments, the king remained a humble traveler on the path of spiritual truth. He was the master of his own ego before he ever became the master of the winds and the oceans and the hidden spirits. The legacy of his wisdom is a reminder that the greatest kingdoms are built on the foundation of justice and divine love. No ruler after him would ever command the same forces, making his era a singular and holy moment in the human journey. Solomon's story is an epic lesson about the potential of humanity when it is fully aligned with the will of the Creator. He saw the world as a complex network of life, where even a tiny ant had a voice that was worthy of being heard by a king. This empathy and his sharp intellect were the two wings that carried his empire to the heights of legendary perfection. As we dive deeper into his life, we see a man who was prepared to handle the most dangerous technologies of the spirit. He remains the eternal heir of wisdom, a prophet whose reign defined the absolute limits of human power in the material world. To understand his technologies, we must first recognize the pure heart of the king who was chosen to command them all. Allah gave him the keys to the unseen, allowing him to perceive the frequencies of the birds and the hidden jinns. This was a kingdom that operated beyond the reach of human biology, where the miraculous was part of the daily routine. Solomon stood as a giant in history, proving that a true king is one who bows his head only to the Lord of all worlds. To comprehend the greatness of Solomon, we must first understand the mysterious nature of the silent servants who built his cities. These beings are known as the jinn, a race created by the divine long before the first human ever walked upon the earth. They were crafted from a smokeless fire, a description that aligns perfectly with the modern scientific concept of plasma. Unlike humans who are made of dense matter, Jinn are composed of a high-frequency energy that exists in a parallel dimension. They occupy the same physical space as we do, yet they vibrate at a level that remains invisible to the limited human eye. This dimension is often referred to as the unseen world, a realm where the laws of time and physical gravity operate differently. The jinn possess a unique biology that allows them to change their physical shape and move with the terrifying speed of light. Some of them are flying spirits, while others assume the form of animals or appear as strange shadows in the corner of a room. Despite their immense power and their long lives, they are still mortal beings who must eventually answer to their Creator. They have their own social orders, their own diverse cultures, and a freedom of will that allows them to choose good or evil. Under the reign of Solomon, the most rebellious and dangerous of these spirits were brought into a state of total submission. This was not a natural occurrence, but a direct miracle granted to the prophet through the absolute authority of God. Solomon was given the power to bind them using specific divine frequencies and the sacred seal that he wore on his finger. The jinn were forced to perform tasks that were physically impossible for humans, such as diving into the deepest oceans. They were tasked with mining rare gems and lifting massive stones that weighed thousands of tons without the use of tools. But why would such powerful beings obey a mortal man who was made from their humble and fragile clay of the earth? The answer lies in the spiritual status of humanity as the appointed guardians of this world under the divine decree. Solomon represented the highest potential of the human soul, a leader who could command both the material and spiritual realms. The jinn recognized that the light of the Creator was shining through the king, making his word an unshakable command. Rebellious Ifrits were chained in iron and forced to work, while the believing jinn served the prophet with sincere loyalty. This cooperation created a hybrid civilization where energy-based lifeforms worked alongside flesh and blood architects. It was a terrifying sight for ordinary men to see giant figures of smoke and light carving palaces into the solid mountains. This unique biology made them the perfect labor force for a king who wanted to build a world that reflected heavenly beauty. They did not experience exhaustion as we do, for their energy was drawn from the very environment and the elements around them. To understand the jinn is to realize that the universe is teeming with life that our modern sensors cannot yet fully detect. Solomon's reign was a bridge between these dimensions, showing that even the invisible world must follow the path of justice. The prophet's control over them was a sign of the perfect balance between the physical intellect and the spiritual heart. Even the most ancient spirits realized that the wisdom of Solomon was a shield that they could never hope to pierce through. They worked in silence, building monuments that would stand for thousands of years as a witness to this extraordinary era. Through their labor, the invisible became visible, and the powers of the hidden world were harnessed for the sake of the truth. This was the only moment in history when the masters of the plasma realm were fully governed by the laws of a human kingdom. The story of the jinn is a reminder that we are surrounded by vast forces that we can only master through faith and humility. Solomon stood as the ultimate commander, proving that the human spirit is the true master of the seen and the unseen world. Even the strongest Ifrit bowed before the light of the prophet, recognizing a majesty that came from the heavens themselves. The biology of the jinn was the fuel that powered the most advanced and mysterious empire the world has ever known. They were the architects of a reality that we can now only glimpse through the ancient scriptures and our deepest prayers. One of the most breathtaking miracles of Solomon's kingdom was his absolute and terrifying control over the invisible winds. The Quran reveals that the wind was made subservient to him, blowing at his command to carry him across the earth. This was not merely a gentle breeze but a sophisticated system of ancient supersonic transportation granted by the divine. A single morning's journey for Solomon covered a distance that a fast caravan would take an entire month to travel today. His evening journey was equally impressive, spanning another month's distance in just a few short hours of silent flight. If we look at this through the lens of modern physics, it appears as a total mastery over the laws of aerodynamics. He did not require heavy metal engines or fossil fuels to lift his vast armies and massive supplies into the blue sky. Solomon commanded the air currents to lift a giant platform, which legends often describe as a magnificent and flying carpet. This platform was essentially a high-capacity vessel that could carry thousands of soldiers and heavy equipment at once. The king understood the specific frequencies required to vibrate the atmosphere and create a pocket of stable gravity. He could maneuver through the clouds with a precision that would leave even the best modern fighter pilots in total awe. This ability gave his empire a level of air superiority that no other nation in history has ever been able to match. He could visit his governors in distant lands or inspect the borders of his realm before the midday sun had reached its peak. The wind was his silent engine, a global conveyor belt that moved at his psychological and spiritual command every day. This technology allowed for the rapid deployment of resources and justice to the furthest corners of his unique world. While other civilizations were limited by the speed of a horse, Solomon moved with the grace of a focused storm. He bypassed the obstacles of mountains, oceans, and vast deserts as if they were nothing more than small pebbles. The sound of his approach was the sound of a rushing gale that signaled the arrival of the master of the unseen realms. This gift from the Creator was a living proof that the material world is fully subject to the spiritual intent of a believer. Solomon's travel was a miracle of logistics, enabling the most efficient government the human race has ever experienced. He moved between dimensions of speed that we are only now beginning to understand through our most advanced science. The air itself recognized the seal on his finger and bent its molecules to provide a path of least resistance. It was a kingdom of light and motion where the boundaries of time and space were expanded by the divine permission. Solomon's power over the wind reminds us that the universe is a machine waiting for the right hand to turn its gears. He walked the earth but traveled the skies, proving that the heart of a prophet is not bound by the gravity of our world. The passengers on his platform felt no turbulence, for the wind was instructed to be a gentle and obedient servant. This was the first global air network, governed by the laws of heaven rather than the limitations of human technology. Even the birds in the sky would follow his trail, creating a living canopy of wings that shielded the king from the sun. To witness the flight of Solomon was to see the perfect union between the spirit of man and the elements of nature. He remains the only ruler in history who truly owned the horizon and commanded the very breath of the world. In the heart of Solomon's legendary kingdom, there existed a phenomenon that completely shattered every known rule of industrial physics. The Quran reveals that Allah made a spring of molten copper flow for him, turning a hard mineral into a liquid as clear as water. This miraculous substance, known as Qitr, was a divine gift that provided the empire with an endless supply of high-quality metal. While ordinary civilizations required massive furnaces and intense heat to melt ore, Solomon possessed a cold fountain of liquid copper. Imagine a natural spring at the foot of a mountain where glowing, liquid metal bubbled from the earth without the need for fire. The jinn took this flowing copper and used it to cast objects of such immense scale that they would dwarf our modern monuments. They created massive bowls as large as reservoirs and intricate architectural features that seemed to radiate a celestial light. This technology allowed the king to fortify his cities with a speed and durability that no rival nation could ever hope to replicate. It was an engineering leap that turned raw mineral into a sophisticated tool for maintaining divine order throughout the land. The jinn, with their plasma-based bodies, could manipulate the liquid copper without being affected by its dangerous chemical properties. This partnership created a unique era of metallurgy where the impossible became the standard for every royal building project. The metal was used to create the towering pillars of his temple and the silent metallic guardians that stood at his palace gates. Some ancient reports suggest that this copper was used to plate the very walls of his cities, making them shimmer under the sun. This technology was likely a precursor to the same advanced metallurgy used by Dul-Qarnayn to seal the Great Iron Wall. Solomon was not just a spiritual leader, he was the head of the most advanced industrial complex the ancient world had ever seen. The flowing copper represented the fluidity of his power and the ease with which he could reshape the material universe. Even today, the secret of a cold flowing metal spring remains a profound challenge to our understanding of thermodynamics. It reminds us that the Creator can change the very nature of physical matter to serve the mission of His chosen servants. Solomon used this metallic wealth not for vanity, but to build a civilization that reflected the majesty of the higher realms. When the king finally passed away, the miraculous spring eventually dried up and vanished from the physical world forever. This lost technology stands as a testament to a time when the earth itself surrendered its secrets to the master of the jinn. Every bronze gate and every shimmering shield in his army was a product of this divine fountain of liquid orange light. To witness the copper flow was to see the hand of God providing the raw materials for a kingdom of absolute perfection. It remains one of the most mysterious industrial miracles in history, a secret lost in the shifting sands of time. The architecture of Solomon's kingdom was not just a display of wealth, but a physical manifestation of a higher celestial order. The Quran describes a workforce of jinn who constructed arches, massive statues, and basins that were as large as city reservoirs. These monuments were not built with the clumsy tools of the Bronze Age, but with a precision that remains a total mystery to us. Some jinn were specialized divers who could descend into the darkest depths of the ocean to retrieve rare and precious jewels. They mined materials from the heart of the mountains and carried them across vast distances using their plasma-based strength. Imagine stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons being lifted into the air and placed with the accuracy of a modern surgical tool. To achieve this level of perfection, Solomon utilized a legendary and terrifying technology known as the Shamir. According to the ancient traditions, this was a substance or an object that could cut through the hardest granite and basalt. It moved through solid rock without the need for iron hammers or the loud, crashing sounds of typical human construction. Many researchers suggest that the Shamir was a form of advanced frequency-based technology or perhaps a biological laser. It could slice through diamonds and minerals with such smoothness that the surfaces reflected light like a polished silver mirror. This allowed Solomon to build his grand temple without the use of metal tools, which were symbols of war and human destruction. The palaces he built featured floors made of glass so transparent that they created the perfect illusion of deep, flowing water. Visitors would often lift their robes in fear of getting wet, only to realize they were walking on a solid and cold surface. This architecture was designed to humble the ego and force the mind to recognize the existence of a much deeper, unseen reality. The jinn worked under a system of absolute discipline, knowing that every single one of their actions was being watched by the king. They carved intricate patterns into the walls that told the history of the universe and the glory of the great Lord of all worlds. These structures were not just buildings, they were spiritual batteries designed to focus the divine energy of the entire kingdom. Even the cooking pots used by his massive army were so large that they had to be permanently fixed into the solid ground. This scale of construction proved that Solomon's empire was a bridge between the physical world and the dimensions of the spirits. Every pillar and every archway was a testament to the time when humanity truly mastered the hidden forces of the natural world. The jinn provided the raw power, but it was the divine wisdom of Solomon that provided the perfect and holy blueprint. This era of construction created a landscape of wonder that would haunt the memories of mankind for many long centuries to come. We are left to wonder if the foundations of these impossible cities still lie buried beneath the shifting sands of the desert. The architecture of Solomon remains the ultimate standard of what can be achieved when a leader is fully aligned with the divine. It was a kingdom of light, stone, and frequency, where the impossible was rendered in solid and shimmering copper and glass. Prophet Solomon possessed a unique gift that went far beyond the simple ability to converse with animals in a magical or poetic sense. He was granted the mantical tear, which translates as the logic or the speech of the birds according to the ancient scriptures. This was a deep biological connection that allowed him to tap into the secret information networks connecting all living creatures. Modern science is only now discovering that animals communicate through complex frequencies and highly sophisticated chemical signals. Solomon acted as a universal receiver, decoding the vibrations of the natural world to gather intelligence from the furthest corners of his land. One day, while leading his vast army of men, jinn, and birds, he reached a valley where a massive colony of ants resided in secret. He overheard a tiny ant warning its companions to enter their underground dwellings so that the king and his army would not crush them. This incident reveals that even the smallest insect possesses an individual consciousness and a collective sense of social duty and survival. Solomon smiled at the ant's words, recognizing that his absolute power came with a responsibility to protect every tiny level of life. The birds in his royal service were not merely pets, but served as advanced reconnaissance units for his global and diverse administration. The hoopoe bird reported on the kingdom of Heir, providing geographical data and political insights that a human scout would likely miss. This demonstrates that the natural world is a living web of data, and Solomon was the only human master who could navigate its paths. He understood that the environment is filled with silent voices that carry the wisdom of the Creator in every single chirp and buzz. His ability to communicate across species boundaries proved that all life vibrates at a fundamental frequency of a deep divine origin. By listening to the birds, he could predict the movements of the clouds and the arrival of distant storms before they ever hit his coast. This biological link turned the entire planet into a massive collaborative network that served the needs of his perfect and holy empire. It was a singular time when the human mind was perfectly synchronized with the natural rhythms of the earth and the starry heavens above. Solomon taught us that true intelligence is the ability to recognize the value and the specific purpose of every living soul in existence. The language of nature remains a lost science today, a secret frequency that was once mastered by the king of the seen and unseen worlds. This connectivity allowed him to manage resources with a level of efficiency that our modern digital systems can only hope to simulate. Every creature in the air or on the ground was a potential ally or an informant in the vast and beautiful kingdom of the prophet. To Solomon, the rustle of the leaves and the flight of the eagle were parts of a divine conversation that he attended with total humility. He was a king who ruled not over nature, but in absolute harmony with it, respecting the life that pulsed through the smallest veins. This profound empathy was the true secret behind his control over the elements and the wild creatures that populated his ancient world. Let us reflect on a time when a king would stop an entire army to avoid hurting a single ant in the dust of the road. When the Queen of Sheba arrived at the gates of Solomon's kingdom, she was already a woman of immense power and sharp intellect today. She had ruled a wealthy nation that worshipped the sun, placing all their faith in the visible light of the physical world around them. Solomon did not seek to impress her with simple gold or massive armies, for he knew she already possessed such worldly treasures. Instead, he designed a psychological trap that would force her to question the very nature of her own physical perception. He commanded the jinn to build a magnificent courtyard with a floor made of the most transparent and flawless glass ever created. Beneath this crystal surface, he channeled a stream of flowing water where colorful fish swam through the white and silver sand. This architectural feat was so advanced that the solid glass became a perfect and invisible shield over the rushing current below. When the queen was invited to enter the palace, she looked down and immediately believed she was about to step into a deep pool. She lifted her long royal robes to keep them dry, exposing her shins in a moment of completely honest human vulnerability and shock. Solomon gently informed her that it was merely a smooth floor of glass, exposing the limitation of her 5 human senses right then. This was not a move intended to shame her, but a brilliant pedagogical test to demonstrate that the seen world is often an illusion. If her eyes could be deceived by a solid floor, then her heart could be deceived by the sun she worshipped as a supreme divine God. This sudden realization shattered the pride of Bilqis and opened her mind to the existence of a much higher and invisible reality. She understood that Solomon was not just a king of matter, but a master of the deeper truths that govern the entire cosmic universe. The glass palace served as a physical metaphor for the thin veil that separates our material life from the divine presence of Allah. Bilqis realized that her sun worship was merely a focus on a creation, while the true creator was hidden behind the light of the stars. This encounter remains one of the most powerful examples of using high technology and art to deliver a profound spiritual awakening. The jinn had worked with a precision that made the glass indistinguishable from the liquid element it covered for the Prophet King. It was an era where the beauty of the architecture was matched only by the depth of the wisdom that resided within its holy walls today. Solomon's palace was a psychological laboratory where the human ego was dismantled by the sheer perfection of a divine perspective. The queen eventually surrendered her heart to the Lord of the worlds, recognizing that her own kingdom was but a small shadow. She saw that true wealth was the knowledge of the unseen, a treasure that no thief or king could ever take away from a sincere soul. Solomon had already brought her throne from her own land through Ilm Ladunni, a feat that had initially left her in total confusion. But the glass floor was the final key that unlocked her spirit and led her to the path of absolute and beautiful monotheism. Their dialogue was a meeting of 2 great minds, but it was the silent message of the palace that truly converted her heart in the end. This story reminds us that we are often blinded by the outward appearance of things, ignoring the solid truth that lies beneath our feet. We walk upon the glass of existence, fearing the water, not realizing that a benevolent hand has provided us with a safe passage. Solomon remains the ultimate architect of the soul, using the beauty of the world to lead us back to the source of all beauty. The Queen of Sheba's journey is our own journey from the worship of the visible to the absolute surrender to the eternal and unseen. At the very center of Solomon's cosmic authority lay a single, mysterious object known to history as the Sacred Seal. This was not a common piece of jewelry made by a human blacksmith in a dusty ancient workshop today. It was a divine instrument of command that served as the physical anchor for the king's metaphysical power. The seal was inscribed with the greatest name of the Creator, a word that vibrates with the primal energy of the universe. When Solomon raised his hand, the shimmer of the ring acted like a spiritual frequency that the jinn could not ignore. Even the most rebellious ifrits and the darkest of the spirits were bound by the light radiating from this holy metal. It functioned as a biological and spiritual key that granted the prophet root access to the laws of the unseen world. For the jinn, the seal was a visual representation of the divine contract that placed them under the authority of a man. The ring allowed Solomon to speak to the elements, commanding the wind and the rivers to follow his instructions. It was the ultimate remote control, bridging the gap between the subtle world of energy and the world of matter. Ancient legends suggest the ring was composed of celestial materials that responded to the spiritual signature of the king. This symbol of power proved that a human being could master the entire planet if his heart was fully submitted to the One. The seal was a unique security system that prevented unauthorized beings from accessing the technologies of the Golden Empire. It is said that when Solomon once lost the ring for a brief period, the harmony of his kingdom was temporarily shattered. This highlights that the power was not in the gold itself, but in the divine permission that the object represented. The ring was a mirror of the king's own soul, radiating the justice and the wisdom that Allah had placed within his heart. Throughout the centuries, the image of the seal has appeared in various cultures as a protector against the forces of evil. It remains the most famous symbol of absolute control over the hidden dimensions that surround our daily lives today. Modern technology tries to replicate this control with digital encryption, but it lacks the spiritual depth of the seal. Solomon's ring was a testament to a time when a single symbol could hold the balance between the light and the dark. To contemplate the ring is to realize that the universe operates through keys that are hidden from the arrogant mind. The seal was the physical link between the throne of a prophet and the infinite power of the Lord of all the worlds. It was a tool of peace used to build a civilization that reflected the orderly beauty of the highest celestial heavens. Solomon used the ring to brand the rebellious spirits, sealing them in copper vessels and casting them into the deep oceans. This act of spiritual imprisonment was a warning to all who sought to disturb the peace of the noble human civilization. The seal acted as a barrier that the devils could not cross, providing a sanctuary for the righteous and the innocent. Every line and every curve etched onto the ring served as a mathematical code that defined the boundaries of the jinn. The king wore the weight of the entire world upon his finger, yet his soul remained light and focused on the Creator. He understood that the seal was a temporary gift, a sacred trust that would eventually return to the hidden realms. It remains a silent sentinel in the history of the world, guarding the memory of an age when man was the master of spirits. The mystery of the ring reminds us that true authority is a gift from above, intended only for the most sincere servants. The atmosphere in the high chamber was heavy with the weight of a divine decree. Prophet Solomon understood that the end of his life was a necessary part of the great plan. He did not fear the transition, but he cared for the holy work that remained unfinished. The king took his position, leaning his weight on his staff as if he were in deep prayer. His eyes remained open, staring out into the horizon where his jinn army was busy at work. The angel of death performed his duty with the silent precision of the heavens today. Solomon passed away in that very moment, yet his physical body did not collapse to the ground. Because he was a prophet, his body was preserved from the natural processes of decay. He stood like a magnificent statue of gold and light, watching over his busy kingdom. The jinn continued their exhausting tasks, fearing the reprimand of their silent master. They brought massive stones from the earth and gems from the deep blue oceans for him. Every time a spirit looked toward the royal palace, they saw the king standing firm. They believed he was analyzing their intentions and the quality of their craftsmanship. The illusion was so perfect that even the most rebellious Ifrits did not dare to pause. This was a massive cosmic test designed to expose the limitations of the spirit world. For 12 long months, the world believed that Solomon was still the ruler of the living. The seasons changed and the sun rose and set, but the king remained in his holy position. The jinn were trapped in their own perception, unable to see the truth of his condition. This proves that the power of the jinn is limited to what is physically visible to them. A tiny creature, a simple woodworm, was finally invited to play its role in history. It began to gnaw at the very base of the staff that supported the weight of the prophet. The sound of its work was so quiet that no energy-based life form could ever hear it. Month after month, the wood was slowly hollowed out by this microscopic soldier of God. The strength of the staff began to fade as the core was turned into nothing but dust. The moment arrived when the physical support could no longer hold the heavy royal weight. The staff cracked with a sharp sound and the body of Solomon finally fell to the earth. The jinn froze in their tracks as the shock of the truth rippled through their ranks. They looked at one another and realized they had been serving a master who was dead. The humiliation was complete, for they had boasted of knowing the secrets of the future. If they had truly known the unseen, they would have felt the king's soul depart long ago. This event serves as a warning to all who believe that spirits have independent power. Solomon's death was a final sermon on the absolute sovereignty of the great Creator. He achieved in death what many rulers could never achieve during their entire lives. The temple was completed, and the pride of the jinn was shattered into 1,000 pieces. The king was finally buried with the honor that befits a master of the seen and unseen. His chamber remained as a witness to the most beautiful and terrifying illusion of all time. We learn that our senses often deceive us when we look at the power of this material world. The true ruler is the one who controls the woodworm and the mighty Ifrit with equal ease. Solomon left behind a kingdom of stone and a lesson of light that will never truly fade. His posture of prayer even in death is a symbol of eternal submission to the Lord. Let us ponder the mystery of the standing king and the secret of the hollowed staff. The era of the miracles was coming to an end, leaving humanity to reflect on the truth. He was a prophet, a king, and a teacher whose final act was a masterpiece of wisdom. After the staff of Solomon finally broke, the grand era of the visible unseen came to an abrupt and silent end. The jinn, realizing their master had departed to the higher realms, immediately fled back to their hidden dimensions. The miraculous spring of molten copper, which had flowed like a river of liquid orange light, suddenly dried up today. Their high-tech tools and the secret frequencies that controlled the very atoms of the wind were withdrawn from the earth. The world returned to the slow and heavy pace of human labor and the simple strength of muscle and iron. But what happened to the vast libraries of dangerous and sacred knowledge that the king had collected during his long reign? According to ancient traditions, the rebellious spirits tried to hide their own dark sorcery within the royal scrolls. They buried these books deep beneath the empty throne of Solomon to confuse the future generations of mankind. They wanted people to believe that the prophet's miracles were nothing more than common magic and evil witchcraft. The divine protected the legacy of Solomon, declaring that he was never a practitioner of the dark and forbidden arts. The secret manuals of Ilm Ladunni were either taken back to the heavens or sealed in places that no human hand can reach today. Humanity was no longer spiritually prepared to handle the immense power that could bridge the gap between dimensions. The Shamir, the frequency-based stone Qitr, vanished into the shadows of history along with the floating platforms of the king. The era of Solomon was a unique divine experiment, a glimpse of what is possible when the soul is perfectly pure. Once the prophet was gone, the heavy veil between our world and the jinn realm was lowered once again for our own protection. We are left with ruins that defy modern explanation and stories that sound like the most impossible of fairy tales. Yet, the absence of these technologies is a reminder that such gifts are only safe in the hands of the most humble servants. The world became a place of mystery once more, where the spirits moved in secret rather than in the open light of day. Every ancient megalith and every unexplained archaeological site might be a lingering fingerprint of that golden age. The knowledge was not lost, but rather stored in the archives of the divine, waiting for a time that is yet to come. Solomon's reign proved that our material science is only a tiny fraction of the total reality of the massive universe. We live in the echoes of his empire, wondering why the wind no longer speaks and why the copper no longer flows for us. The closure of this technological window was a mercy, preventing the corrupt from using such powers to destroy the planet. Everything that was built by the jinn remains as a silent testament to a man who ruled with the absolute light of God. Solomon remains the only human to ever hold the keys to the entire world, and his books are now the secrets of the heavens. The epic journey through the golden kingdom of Prophet Solomon brings us to a singular and profound realization today. We have seen the jinn labor, the copper flow like water, and the majestic wind serve as a royal and silent chariot. Yet, the most important lesson is not the magnitude of the miracles, but the heart of the man who commanded them. Solomon was a king who never forgot that his vast authority was a temporary trust from the Lord of all worlds. The high technology of his age has vanished, but the spiritual blueprint he left behind remains eternal for us. We live in a time where we worship our own small digital inventions and our fragile iron and steel machines. We assume that our rockets and our satellites make us the absolute masters of the physical universe and the oceans. Solomon reminds us that true power is found in the absolute surrender to the one who created the wind and the jinn. Arrogant pride is the heavy veil that prevents us from seeing the hidden patterns of grace that still move through our lives. The king who stood dead for a whole year proved that even the greatest mortal is eventually subject to the heavens. It is not the gold on the throne that matters, but the light of the sincerity that shines within the human soul today. Let us reflect on the beauty of a world where man and nature were once perfectly aligned under the divine law. O Allah, we ask you for the wisdom of Solomon and the humility that opens the gates of the unseen and secret world. Protect our hearts from the greed of this life and the traps of the rebellious and the darkest of the spirits. Grant us the ability to recognize your majesty in the smallest ant and the most vast and starry night sky above. Guide us to the path of justice and keep us among those who use their gifts to serve your noble and holy creation. Bless our homes with peace and shield our families from the trials of the soul and the pains of the material world. Forgive us for our many weaknesses and help us to remember that every breath we take is a gift from your presence. May the legacy of the Prophet King inspire us to seek the truth that lies far beyond the visible and cold horizon. We invite you to share your thoughts on the miracles of Solomon in the comments section below this video today. Which of his lost technologies fascinated you the most, and how do you see his influence in our world today? Join our community of seekers by writing Ameen and sharing your favorite verse of divine wisdom for every believer. Thank you for watching this documentary, and may the light of the truth guide your path through the seen and unseen.